This is Radar for On the Radar Entertainment blog, coming to another edition of Movie Reviews and Observations number 116. Due to some events this week, only were able to get to 5 movies. First movie I watched was The Last Champion, starring Cole Hauser. Now this movie was essentially like a 2-hour movie almost, like an hour 40 minutes, 50, but it was 2 hours at most. And it was like, this guy was a wrestling star, could have been in the Olympics, drugs, blah, blah, blah. He's out in the middle of nowhere doing nothing. So the whole movie's like a redemption story where he comes back home because his mother died and, the house needs to be foreclosed, whatever. And he's just like, I'm going to be there for a bit. But then it turns into, you know what? Let me go reconnect with the former people I went to school with, Firehouse, even though most of the local people hate him for disgracing the town. But not his wrestling coach. His wrestling coach, he, who I know from SWAT and other shows and stuff, Louis Ferreira from SWAT and other shows, he's like this good wrestling coach who, despite not being the most rich person, he helps out every student possible. They have another student and stuff. And and that basically he's out there looking out for this other student who he sees potential into being this next amazing wrestler. And in doing so, this guy's dealing with a broken home, blah, blah, blah. And he's like out there helping this kid. But then, of course, the dude's barely in the movie because that's the whole plot of the movie is he dies, and this, Cole Hauser dude has to come over and be the wrestling coach. And then he's got people from his past, and they're like, yeah, you got to do this, this, and that to redeem yourself. And he's like, no, I'm really in it for the kid. My issue with this movie was I'm just hoping that they basically were like, okay, let's make this movie about redeeming the guy who used to be great as a coach, but then also about this other kid and saying that he shouldn't give up his dreams based on what's going on with his family so he can be a wrestling star. So obviously it's Dove approved, so it's age appropriate for everyone, but they should have stick to one plot of it's about the guy who used to be a wrestling star redeeming himself. Or is it about this kid from a broken home trying to come and be this wrestler and go to college and all this other stuff? And then also he's got a girlfriend he's trying to do, this guy, and all the other stuff. So it was a little bit over the place. Then I watched this movie called Siberia. So I thought it was like a movie where Willem Dafoe is lost in Siberian, forest or whatever, woods, and he's got to survive. No, he's some bartender in some place where he doesn't know anybody that speaks their name. And he starts seeing things. He's acting crazy. He goes somewhere and he sees himself. He sees other people. There's naked people. There's, little tiny people who are naked. Tall people. It's like all over the place. Like, is he having illusions? He's like falls off a cliff. This movie, the only saving grace was it was like barely 90 minutes. And this was not, I don't understand how this could be like a psychological thriller or a horror film. It was actually just a horribly put together. And I don't understand why a great actor, Willem Dafoe's talent, who was like in The Lighthouse and he's in the Batman movies, Spider-Man movies and stuff, that like he would put himself in this short little movie that is horrible. I don't understand why he made this movie, so I'm sorry. Then I watched Death in Texas with Stephen Lang and Bruce Dern and whatnot, and the movie was, I don't understand this, as I've said this many times in my movie reviews. Why was this movie made? Who is this movie for? It basically starts off with some dude getting parole and going to see his mother. Then you find out that his mother had him when he was 15, so nobody knows her father, their mother and son, they're like siblings. And it's about him trying to get his life together, but then he's only known one thing, being a convict. And his mother's have cancer, and she's not taking care of herself, or liver, whatever, is an issue. And Stephen Lang's a nurse, but he used to be a doctor, and I feel like he's a little timid for usually what he is. And Bruce Dern running a huge drug operation with the cartel, not believable. He's a little bit overrated. He's not the world's greatest actor. He's not a great actor. I just don't like him and stuff. And it was just like, yeah, the whole point of the movie was this dude was like, well, my life has sucked. My mom's life has been good, and the worst thing happened to her was me being raped at 15. So I'm going to steal money from my friend who works for the drug cartel, and I don't care if I die. I don't care if the money doesn't help my mother get the procedure she needs illegally. I'm going to give her my own organ. Whoop-de-doo, like that. It was like really, really stupid. So yeah, I can't. Waste of a time. Initiation, though, that was actually a pretty good film. I feel like they basically showed rape culture in sororities and fraternities and college life and people trying to cover things up for star athletes. So I thought it was pretty good. And basically, like, this exclamation point is what men were saying if you slept with a woman, blah, 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 blah. And the main woman in the movie, her brother is under investigation and stuff like that. And Lawson Morano, who's from, Riverdale, playing Betty's father, I've seen him before. A lot of these other dudes who are playing the young people, I've seen them before. John Herritis from Castle and This Is Us was in the movie, so I thought that was interesting. So this movie had some actors that I've seen them before, but basically the woman's brother dies, and they're trying to figure out who killed him. And it's like a horror film, The Race Against Time. This killer in a mask is killing all the bros in the fraternity, and the president or dean of the college who's trying to hide it and stuff. And it's just like interesting to see who's the one killing them. A little bit of a plot twist. I thought it was well acted and well put together. And again, 90-something minutes, not that long of a movie. So I would say The Initiation was a pretty good horror film. I've seen a lot of horror films where they've either been bad or they're just been not good, not bad in the middle. I thought this was above average. I feel like Rotten Tomatoes is correct to put in the 60 range because it was a pretty good horror film. It wasn't the best horror film, but it was definitely watchable and pretty good based on the acting from the people in the movie, Lindsay Lohangi and the other people in the movie. So I would suggest it. Last movie I watched was SAS Red Notice. First critique is the movie didn't have to be 2 hours plus. It kind of dragged on a bit with his personal life and explaining the whole crime family and the military unit that he's on and how Andy Serkis, who's a big-time actor, his involvement in this. And I'm a huge fan of Ruby Rose, but some of the other movies I've watched with her, she's saving the day, playing a criminal in this one. And then her father is like this is basically this dude who's like a guy who's done a lot of things, shady things. He's got his own group of people and stuff like that. And she's like the next one in line, Tom Wilkinson. Her brother, who I've seen before, he was in a show Emergent, but he had an English accent. He wasn't playing a British person, so it was interesting. And this main dude, Sam Houston, didn't seem the most believable dude because he looks like he's like, my grandparents had money, my parents had money, I got a butler watching my old big-ass mansion, and you're like, okay, cool. But he's actually working for the military. He's one of his biggest assets. And then the guy on the team, I've seen him before, and it's all this thing where like the Prime Minister of England uses these forces through what Andy Serkis is doing, blah, 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 blah. People on the actual government force are being paid off by Ruby Rose's people, and it had the typical amount of action. Shooting, violence, killing, saving the day, his girl being a doctor so she doesn't believe in killing. And if this movie was maybe 20, 30 minutes shorter, I'd say it's a really good action film. Tom Wilkinson barely being in the movie, that makes sense. I just don't, Andy Serkis tying himself to a movie that you can barely find on the internet or anywhere to watch it. You have to get it all the way from a library somewhere else. That overall, I thought it was pretty good, but the best movie I watched was Initiation, based on the fact that it was one of the better horror films I've watched in the last couple of years. Last Champion was flawed, but I can say that kids can go and watch this movie because it was an supposedly inspirational movie. And SAS Red Notice is a typical action, film with all the gory and bloodness and trying to save the day. I would just say skip Siberia despite William Dafoe and skip Death in Texas despite Stephen Lang and people loving Bruce Stern. Thanks for listening to another edition of Movie Reviews and Observations, number 116. For On the Radar Tay Blog, I'm Radar. See you guys next time.